man. You cannot marry a woman without gills. You're from two different worlds. Oh, I've wasted my life.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and I've got my good friend Perch from the Comics by Perch podcast YouTube channel back on here to talk about the state of some of the industry as far as retailers. How you doing, Perch?
I'm doing great. It's been a busy couple of weeks, so I'm glad we're past some of those things and now get to enjoy it.
Well, congratulations on your first comic book crowdfunder. Obviously, it isn't your book; you didn't write it or do the art or anything. But I know you had a lot of part in the logistics and getting the crowdfunding going. Funded in less than an hour. Looks like it's going all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Was proud of that. And it's being a publisher to a large extent. So we should do a video on that. I'd love to. Part of the goal of this is to set something up lots of people can use, even if they hate me, don't want to do anything with me. You can still use some of the data. Get your comics out there. That's the goal.
Absolutely. Now, you're also a comic retailer. I think that's true. Just about back in the game, right?
With any luck, less than 8 weeks away.
Absolutely. So you've been working on getting back into the retail for quite a couple of years now.
Yeah. Well, really in a year. I mean, obviously stopped with the pandemic and everything else, but for about a year, anxious to do it.
And this is not the greatest time in the history of the world, Perch. I don't know if you heard about what happened with Penguin Random House.
Yeah, for sure.
You got those issues, although it does sound like Penguin Random House has responded at least initially saying they're going to do some things. But there's a lot of really crazy stuff going on right now, specifically with paper, suppliers. It sounds like if you're going to have your comics printed overseas, you're basically rolling the dice. Maybe you'll get your comics, maybe you won't. We're having all these large-scale delays. It can be very lucrative for a retailer, but it's a lot of risk right now.
There's a lot of risk, and I don't think it's it's not a healthy time by any stretch of imagination. It's given me pause. Obviously, want to get back in the game. Have a lot of things going on. It gives me some encouragement to see some of the direct market. I still think that that crowdfunding and that model it's okay, but it can't scale the way it's currently at. So there's got to be this next step. But it seems more and more clear that next step, as some people have speculated, is not going to be, hey, there could be some kind of umbrella company that then sells back into the direct market. That's a good step. Maybe that would be helpful to get a lot of these crowdfunded comics in some kind of system there, but it's not going to be sustainable. That's not going to be true scale either. We have to look at this new thing. So that's on my mind a lot because it's tough. Penguin Random House. I mean, look at it this way. Nobody likes to say the words, hey, you're dumb very much. But how in the world you have all this time to prepare? You're going into this market. You're going to vend and distribute comic books. If there's one thing, only one thing that you should not do there's a constant complaints about that your competitor or previous distributor did all the time. What is that one thing? It's deliver damaged product. So what do? You just screw up on day one the shipping, which is insane. I mean, that there's no other way to say that, but that's completely dumb.
It's crazy. So what I've ascertained during my time here with the trends that I've seen, there are really two ways. I mentioned it yesterday on the channel. Two ways that comic shops are thriving right now. One is to go full up into back issues and really have a nice, big, robust stock of back issue comics. If you're going to go with new comics, you got to be a little bit more risky, and you got to have lots of ratio variants, and you have to have some store exclusive variants.
Yeah, I think there's a third way. So I think that's right. I do think back issues, but back issues is one of those things that it won't last at this rate forever. I've heard people say it will not. There is a boom, and then eventually, like anything,
it'll peter out.
Yeah, I mean, being in the business last 30 years, back issues have spikes. This is not like the first time this has ever happened. It's happened many times. And it's like waves in the ocean. It comes up, people satisfy that initial demand, it goes down. That's how it normally is. With new comics, I think the variants and some of the store exclusive stuff, it's again playing to speculators, and I still think that's a very wavy, bumpy market. There are a couple shops here locally, at least for me, that are thriving, even and new issues is still a big part of their money. But what they're doing is they know their business, they know their customer, and they know what will sell extremely well. And it sounds maybe strange, maybe to some of your listeners to hear this, but a lot of retail shops really don't have a good pulse on what's going to sell. They order based on what, Marvel and DC promote, and then they kind of filter from there. They say, here's a big name, rule of thumb, going to get 50 copies of this. There's not a real scientific method to it. And many shops have no inventory system at all. They don't know what's coming out. So if you walk into your shop, you'll find kind of one of two things. Either somebody's operating that way, or they just kind of blindly order. It comes in, they hope they sell it. Or there's the shop that can literally tell you how many copies of Avengers sold in the pull box, how many copies on the shelf, how many copies were left over at month's end. The shops like that tend to be writing this pretty well, because comics has gotten a little bit more predictable in terms of what will sell. The movements are slower. But a lot of people don't do that work. So it's a lot more work, by the way, to keep that track of that inventory. Yeah,
to keep track of your sell through and exactly how many copies do you want to have, just for inventory later and stuff like that. It could be very difficult. The other thing I guess I haven't mentioned, the other avenue out there that's really hot right now, obviously, is e-commerce. Having an e-commerce store where you're essentially shipping out comics, hopefully to your region, but potentially nationwide.
For sure. And the challenge there is that shipping is just so variable and crazy. This crowdfunded book that I put out yesterday, it is half the cost. Of the money you pay is shipping, half. That is ludicrous. That it's gotten very expensive. It's gotten very unpredictable and slow. This is not the way it should work either.
And it's going to get slower. We've been hearing the warnings that deliveries were going to be very not performing very well around Christmas, because we have all this backup already, and obviously it's going to be taxed to the max around the holidays as well. They've been saying you should probably have your Christmas shopping, if you're going to do it online, it should be done already.
Yeah.
If you want to have your stuff on time.
Well, particularly if you're getting stuff from overseas. And I think a lot of people don't realize when you are ordering from Amazon, especially specialty goods, you're getting it from overseas. But these are all, any retail shop has to be thinking about other sources of income. And that other source of income can't be Funko. It's got to be some other thing that you bring to the market. And whether it's, who knows? You got to come up with something else. It's not going to work this way.
It definitely feels like if Penguin Random House aren't able to right the ship and address some of their issues, it could be like a bloodbath for comic retailers in 2022, at least the first half. Because a lot of these retailers are counting on these big number ones that Marvel's going to be putting out for their exclusive variant, for their store exclusive variants, for the ratio variants, and really to drive sales. If they can't count on getting comics in a sellable order or condition, that could be detrimental.
Well, absolutely. And I do think 2022 is probably the really bad year that is coming. And what I mean by that is the comics have kind of these 15, 20-year arcs where they go through changes. And it's clear we've begun one from all the movements of people going to Substack, the change to Penguin Random House. Just everything is moving around. People are recalibrating. And always when there's a recalibration like this, there is a disaster. There's a moment of pain. I do think these steps are going to result in a healthier, better industry. It will look much different. I think it will have more players in it. I think some of the older players will have lost some of their power, and I think that's a good thing. But I think 2022 is a year where all the people have been kind of hanging on and hoping it will kind of hang in there. That's where it's going to go really bad for some people. And I don't say it with glee. I think there are probably some people listening to this right now going, yes, bring it on. But it's going to be ugly for some people for sure.
We know we have the manga shortage that's actually been going on for this entire year.
That's right. Yeah.
And, we got the paper shortage. So a lot of comic books are being delayed, some not being completely fulfilled on their orders and stuff like that. The weird thing with manga is they're actually kind of in a position to handle a shortage like this. If you can't get your book, you can just go to our app for $2 and you can keep up with all your stuff. You go fill in your run later on, right? You want to get your whole collection. It doesn't feel like North American comics are ready for some type of paper shortage and all the stuff where we have all these, ships at port not being allowed to come in and deliver goods right now.
No, and I know a couple manga companies have actually reached out and pushed people, given free codes for the app to say, look, I'm sure I'm sure a lot of the listeners right now say, I don't want digital. That's fine, but it is a cool move, I think, for the company to say, look, there is a problem getting you your comic. It is outside of our control. There is this paper shortage. We know this. Here's 3 months for free. You don't have to use it, but we want to keep you hooked and keep you engaged. I think that is smart. By contrast, I know Marvel Unlimited does have a free trial. Comixology is doing some things, obviously Scott Tober and everything that he's got going on, but it's still messy. The digital world blows here in the US. It has not gone anywhere close. And in many of the cases, it's because the publisher is still treating digital like it's not really their problem. Kind of much like print. They're going to put material out there and it's like, Amazon will take care of it. Or even Marvel Unlimited almost operates like a separate company. And that's not going to help anything. It's not going to, you have to take ownership of it. And when I see, Shueisha, reaching out directly to end customers saying, here's $10 for you to spend on our app. I mean, that's what should be happening.
Yeah, it's a smart move because, you got your run. You could maybe miss out on 2 volumes, so you want to keep reading. Get you right in there. Maybe you went on there and you checked out the anime on Netflix or whatever. You want to continue the story, but the volumes aren't out. You go check it out and, fill it in later if you like the story. So, it's a great backup system that's there, but it's always going to be there. There's no shortage, unless, the customer doesn't have a phone or, a tablet.
No, absolutely. And I'd like that Viz has some connection. So if you are reading something along and there's a print version, you'll start to get it offered to you of saying, hey, we noticed you're reading this on the digital app. You want this to, click here and you can get this shipped out to you print wise.
That's smart.
It's very smart. It's absolutely smart.
It's like one of those crazy things. You think like Comixology, when you if you go through and you read, you download and read 4 books from, let's say, Sean Gordon Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't they saying we have, Sean Gordon Murphy has these prints of these books. Would you like the original art? He's got
Absolutely.
This art book. Would you like us to ship it to you?
No, it's a very hands-off business. And we start talking about retailers, but this is why it does hit retailers. It's a very, we're going to make something and then we're going to kind of toss it into the air and good luck to it. And we don't really care about what happens after we toss it out the door. And I mean, again, it's all, I'm looking at the Shueisha app right now. And not only are they, pushing add this as a favorite, there's a connection to get a print version, but it's even telling you, hey, the next chapter is coming in 3 days. There's a countdown to every new issue. And all of this stuff is talking direct to consumer of, look, here's where there's more content for you. Here's when you can come back. Here's when you need to buy. It's a very active, engaged system. And, manga places that deal manga in Japan, those retail locations, they're doing fine. They're selling print. They're happy. They enjoy this connection. And so it's going to be a rough time, but I do think the US will start to look more like Japan. I do think that some of these small independent companies, at this point, if you're Boom or your IDW or your Dark Horse or something like that, what you should do is staring you in the face. Just copy it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. We're seeing kind of all these indicators. Hopefully the paper shortage kind of fixes itself soon, but it sounds like with the warnings that we're getting from DC and Marvel, it's only going to get worse, right?
I think it's only going to get worse, at least for a period of time. I do think so. The paper shortages for the big companies aren't going to impact us by months and months. I still maintain, and I've heard from people on the inside certainly that DC's delays that they blamed on the paper shortage are absolutely not all about the paper shortage. They have a massive headcount editorial shortage. They have a lot of confusion about what's going on with Discovery, and they're not, data is not happening. There's a lot of paralysis there. That's independent of paper. I think Marvel will go through their same version of that, or is going through the same version of that. They've also lost quite a few people. It's just not as public. But, the smaller companies are definitely going to get hit with paper. If the distribution from Penguin Random House doesn't improve, that's going to be an issue. Diamond's not getting better. That's concerned either. Although, Penguin Random House did a, hold my beer and basically proved they could do it worse. None of these things are good. And if there's delays in shipping and delays in the supply chain and just logistics overall, again, message to comic stores is you got to have a way to sustain yourself that's not about new issues. And you do need to, if you're not taking inventory now, you need to start. You have to get precise about what you're doing.
Absolutely. So just, some of my concerns that I've been seeing, obviously we've been talking about the Penguin Random House. We got this paper shortage. There's a lot of issues as far as the way that Marvel and DC have really gimmicked their sales. But DC is really caught up to Marvel as far as gimmicking all these ratio variants and everything that are really covering up a lot of the issues as far as the quality and the lagging interest in the actual stories that they're producing, which is obviously going to be detrimental. But we are seeing a huge spike, I think, in interest in indie comics.
We are, yeah, and I do think people are learning they can explore other things, and I think that's great. The comic shops need to be prepared to deal with that and how to order. Next year, we're going to see the relaunch of almost all of Marvel's books, a kind of big new #1 blitz, a new marketing campaign. Almost everything is getting restarted. And over at DC, you're going to get another Crisis, and you're going to get multiverse Crisis going on, and so that's what they're offering. But I think in both cases, the interest for Marvel fans to go through another #1 relaunch, I think that's going to surprise Marvel at how little interest there is in that. I think over at DC, people are not terribly interested in another Crisis. They simply want to get good stories for a while, and they're invested in long runs. So yeah, the door is open for indies, but all of this stuff spells for a chaotic 2022.
All right, Birch, I do want to say thank you very much for joining me, time to talk about some of these issues, and I think we're also going to have you on the next day or two as well.
That sounds great. Yeah, look forward to it.
Right. Later, brother.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.